What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 21 of To the Show We Go, featuring Ed Hand and myself, Andrew Parker. Today's episode, we have our third media member in these 21 episodes. We had Rob Bradford on for episode number 5, and then we had Lou Merloni on for episode 10. And today, we're joined by Christopher Smith of Mass Alive. And now, Chris,
I get the Roger Clemens episode.
That's actually a good point.
Yes, I mean, I'm going to be the Roger Clemens of this podcast if you compare me to, Lou Merloni and all these other guys. So here we go.
Hey, you can follow up on Bradford and Merloni, but I just wanted to. My first question is how has your offseason been treating you?
Good. I mean, it's kind of crazy because I have 2 kids, and so I'm with them. The oldest goes Monday, Wednesday, Friday to preschool. I've got a 1-year-old that I stay with. So basically I'm Mr. Mom, during the off season. But when my wife gets home from teaching during the day, then it's, on to, the real job, the working and, Red Sox stuff. And obviously this has been an interesting off season, with, just kind of trying to figure out who they're going to pick and, who's rejecting interviews, for, the chief baseball officer job and whatever like that. And, getting to work with, Chris Cotillo and Sean McAdam. I mean, Chris Cotillo is, crazy to work with just because, he's always, digging into stuff and he's always texting me like, text this person. I gotta, and so, it's always fun, but, the off season's, interesting for me just because, I get so much time at home and, I'm with the kids so much. So they drive me a little nuts, but then when the wife comes home, I get to do baseball.
You've been doing baseball. You've been making some pretty I don't want to say outrageous claims, but claims that I know are going to get Red Sox fans pretty hyped up. You said something about Roman Anthony the other day, the number 2 prospect in the system. Something that I believe you said it wouldn't be surprising if he was in the majors by the end of 2024. Do you recall that?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it and it's like, I was just kind of putting together a list of, 10 guys that, could make their major league debut in 2024. And, he's probably on the outside shot of the list. I mean, there's other more reasonable guys on the list, but, I mean, he's that type of player. I mean, it's incredible the ascent that he made in 14 months. He was in high school. That 14 months later, he's in AA.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think that you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I don't disagree with you at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he made it either. But people don't, you don't hear people generally predicting that about 19-year-olds.
You look at the last guy that was a teenager to make it to Portland in the Red Sox organization. It's 2012 with Xander Bogaerts, and the next year, he was in the majors by the end of that year. And so I think he has that type of potential just because of, obviously, you can look at the extra base hits and how hard he hits the ball and barrels the ball and stuff. But, the fact of the matter is that, he's just incredible, plate discipline, what he wants to do at the plate in terms of, there's a 17.5 walk percentage this past year in the minors. And it's like, you don't see that from a 19-year-old. And so, you look at Abreu and Casas, who are so good at, chase percentage and stuff like that. And he can be that type of guy that, I mean, he's going to strike out sometimes. He had some, issues at Greenfield with strikeouts, especially against left-handers. But I think he's the type of guy that, he really has the potential to make that jump. And, it could be they may not need him next year either. Right. I mean, if he's, it depends. I mean, he just work his way up and, he could, force them into that kind of decision like Mookie Betts did, I just think he has that potential. I mean, if he climbed up 3 or 4 levels this year, why can't he climb up 2 next year?
Yeah, the talent is definitely there, and just the fact that he improved at each level. And I mean, Salem is kind of a weird thing anyway, where he just wasn't swinging at things that he didn't think he could hit, but him going up from high A to double A and still performing at double A, I mean, that was pretty encouraging. Small sample size, but I thought it was. I was surprised that you said that out loud, but I was part of me was kind of like, oh, I feel validated. Thank you.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Like, you look at the competition too at Portland, and, I think the age differential is like, he's like 3.5 years younger than, most of the people there and stuff like that. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
the average age of the person at Portland now, and we saw Marcelo, struggle at Portland. However, you would hope that a lot of that has to do more with, the injury than the age thing, but the age thing is a factor too. I mean, like, and so, these are young guys. And so to have that kind of impressive run, obviously, at the end of the year with Portland, is kind of crazy. And then, Kyle Teel, now obviously he was a college pick, but he made a really fast ascent too. And I was looking at him and he was on my list just because, like, you look at it and obviously Craig Breslow's going to try to find a backup catcher, right? Like somebody with major league experience that can start in, Pawtucket, Worcester next year, kind of like
can't have a Jorge Alfaro situation happen again.
But like, the way that I've heard about Teal's defense and everything, I mean, the most important thing you want from a third catcher, a guy that can come up if McGuire or Wong is injured, is defense. And, he might be better than anybody that they could get defensively. I mean, that's the number one priority, defense, right? Like, the hitting's on the back burner. And so, like, those guys that made that fast ascent, I wouldn't be surprised either one of them.
Well, let me ask you, the three guys that you mentioned, Mayer, Anthony, and Teel. I'm not a betting man, but if you had to bet, which one do you think is going to get to the major leagues first?
That's a good question. I would say Marcelo. Now, I think that Teel, I mean, catching, it's funny, like Boris, I don't think Boris takes like, every guy. I mean, he knew the potential of this kid when he took him as a client, right?
Right.
Like, but also the catching position is difficult because you have to, it's more than just more than goes into it. You have to be that leader and stuff like that at the pitching staff and all that. So they might want to have him develop for an entire year or whatever. I think that Marcelo's issues, I mean, if you look at what he told Bradford about when that injury happened, that shoulder injury and everything, and then the week that he took off after that, and the numbers, dramatically went down. The first thing that I saw when, I saw Marcelo in spring training, his first year in the Red Sox organization, is just like, wow, that's sweet swing, like there's just not like too much, going on. It's just, so smooth. And so I think that we will see him like next year or, in 2024, get off to a good start at Portland, right? Like, I don't think that it's going to be the case where he goes back and does what, struggles the way he did. I think he'll be healthy. He'll be, a year older.
Motivated,
Definitely. And, you look at it and, they're obviously Breslow's going to try to get like, sure up that second base spot. But there is, I mean, Trevor Story has had, plenty of injuries. Now you look at, Trevor Story's, game logs when he was in Colorado, and he was very durable, but, he hasn't been obviously over the past 2 years. So, you might need a shortstop because of that or something, or, you might want to figure out the second base position. And if he's off to a hot start, I mean, I'm hoping, or I think that Craig Breslow will probably not go into spring training with just what they have on the 40-man roster in terms of second base wise. But, if you don't find somebody, there's an option there. It's either to, you move Story. I'm not saying out of spring training, that's what it's going to be, the opening day roster. But I'm saying if he gets off to a hot start in Portland and stuff, he works his name into that. So I'd say probably him. But, like, as I said, Kyle Teel might be better than what they get in terms of, defensively, in terms of what they get is a third emergency catcher if one of those two guys at the in the major leagues goes down. And so then, they might like it. So, it could be any of them, but I would think that Marcelo probably.
There's one other guy in this group, and then I will stop hoarding this from you, Parker. But
It's all
one
good,
other
man.
guy that you did that, and we haven't mentioned him as much, but he was very young at Double A last year. Plays a mid infield position. Had a nice bounce back season, and that's Nick York, who he was the Portland Sea Dogs team MVP. It wasn't the best season, but he stayed healthy. He hit reasonably well. Do you think that he plays a role in this in the future of the Red Sox, or is he more just fancy trade bait?
Like, I thought he could have been trade bait like this, past offseason. You've got repetitiveness at certain positions, and you look at like a Blaze Jordan who is really hot, obviously at Greenville, and you have Tristan who is going to be your long-term first baseman or whatever. So why, that was my issue with Bloom, is he has repetitiveness at certain positions and yada yada yada. York is, as we talk about, second base is an open, position here, a spot that they don't have, great depth at right now. And I look at his year, it's very challenging because you look at what he did his first year in the minor leagues, as what, like an 18, 19-year-old coming out of high school that first year. It was ridiculous. Like, the strikeout rate was like 14% or something like that. The walk rate was 11%. I mean, he was making great contact and he was slugging too. And so I don't know if there's been, I mean, obviously the injuries his second year,
Didn't help, yeah.
didn't help, but also maybe there's just a change in approach too. He's selling out a little bit for more power. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but like, I'd like to see him just become more of that, hitter he was in the first year, where he's just, racking up the, contact guy.
Yeah.
And so
he was sort of like the second coming of Howie Kendrick
Yeah.
at Salem initially, and he's he hasn't been bad, but he's not what he was that first year either.
Yeah. And, so you look at him though, and, he looks like he's a guy that is motivated, in good shape and stuff like that. And, and I think he has a lot of potential, but, I think I got overhyped about him maybe the first year just because what he was doing. If you look down that, the first round picks that year, I mean, it was pretty incredible what he was doing. He was outperforming a lot of guys that were picked ahead of him.
So I got a two-parter for you, and you've kind of mentioned a little bit on the Breslow thing. So my first question of this is, did you get tired of writing rumor articles about who was going to be the guy or declining and all that? I know you've kind of mentioned it. And then my second part of it is, which you alluded to earlier, is do you think he's going to be aggressive in moving some of these prospects, and how soon do you think that will come?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, yeah. I mean, I would rather write about trade rumors and free agent rumors than, GM rumors. I mean, this is kind of a weird, thing where Sam Kennedy came out and said, like, he didn't think that, only having the last three GMs or the head of baseball operations for 4 years each, and then getting canned, each one of them, would, affect people wanting to come. But if you look at it, I mean, look at a guy that's well respected, has been in that position a long time. Does he want to uproot his family to, Boston, for the potential of, only being there for 4 years and stuff? You're uprooting your family. You have to think about family stuff and all that. And I wish the owners of the Red Sox would be the athletic director at Syracuse, because I would really like the football coach out. It's like they have no patience, and I would love the no patience approach at Syracuse. But no, but like, so it's an interesting, like, it was interesting, to hear some of the stuff. And Cotillo was really good at getting some of those rumors. Obviously, Alex Spear was like, those two were got like fighting over stuff like that, like, who could be first on that stuff. Bradford got a lot of good information too. But yeah, I mean, I think that what was the second part of the question? I know you said to get bored with
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, so my second part of that was you had kind of talked about earlier that like Bloom had a lot of repetitiveness at positions. Now, do you think that he will dip into the prospects this offseason, and how fast do you think that will come?
I think it's interesting of like how he's going to, I have no idea what his approach is. Like, I don't know what he's going to be. He's only been a number 3, like, and he has had in Chicago, he did have, insight into, or, he was involved in, free agent signings and things like that, evaluating talent. But I don't know like what he's going to be. He could be extremely like, Bloom, who doesn't want to trade, anybody in terms of prospects because for fear that they're going to be the next Jeff Bagwell or something like that. Or he could be, more of a guy like Theo Epstein, where he was willing to trade guys, but he also wanted to develop, from within and stuff like that. So it's hard to tell. I think that the great thing about Breslow is that they do have some interesting pitchers in their organization. They don't have much, obviously, like, depth guys that you can like plug into the rotation right at AA, AAA, right? Like, somebody that's ready and stuff like that. And I think there's been that narrative that Boston has had difficulty, developing pitching. And I think that, that's his expertise. And the most important thing, is straightening that out and getting guys that are starting pitchers, getting guys that, like a Gonzalez and like, he has the potential, but his walk rate's up like that, figure some things out. And it's funny. I was thinking the other day, I was like, Brian Abraham, who's the farm director, obviously, was actually caught Breslow, right? Like, as the 2013 bullpen catcher and everything. So they already have a, relationship started. It's going to be like, he has to really just delve in. Actually, that was going to be a question I asked him at the GM meetings, like, how much studying do you do on the farm system, like immediately when you get the job? Because obviously the most important thing is to know your own players, right? And to know, who you can trade, who you want, who can be a good player, who maybe won't be, that type of thing, So like the self-evaluation is the most important thing. And he hasn't been here, so he's going to have to, lean on a lot of the guys like Brian Abraham and stuff to give him reports.
Do you believe that the candidate for whoever takes over as GM is already in the system, or do you think that they're going to outsource for that?
I think they probably will outsource for it. If it's an internal candidate, I think the best, I thought that Eddie Romero was, good for the head
Yep.
job, right? Like I think
love Eddie Romero. This is a pro Eddie Romero podcast.
Yeah, like I think that, so if there's anybody, I think it will be him. You have seen guys, they have gone from within, Dombrowski with Mike Hazen and, and then Bloom with BOH and stuff like that. But like with Ramiro, I think that, he's so interesting because like, I think he's a really good evaluator of talent. I think that he has the, I don't want to say the balls, but, he, to make a move and stuff like that, like to to go out there and trade a prospect and stuff. And so I think that he's just and he's a good communicator, right? Like he just is a people person, and that's so important. He relates so well, like talking to the players really like him and stuff like that. And I think he would be great for it. But, maybe Breslow pick somebody from outside. But if they're, the last 2 times they've done it from within, if anybody is that guy, I would say it should be Ramiro.
I'm going to kind of go a little like off the rails here. It's a little opposite of what we've been just talking about. And I'm assuming you've been tuning into the World Series and not Tommy DeVito playing quarterback for the Giants. But
I heard they didn't let him throw the ball, but that's all I know.
Oh, it was bad, man. It was on Red Zone, and they were just like, "Oh, DeVito's in," and he like threw like 3 passes. They went like -5 yards. He wouldn't throw it beyond the line of scrimmage.
I don't know anything about football, so I'm just assuming this is Danny DeVito's son.
No,
The
it's
Syracuse
Tommy,
legend.
who's yeah, he was a quarterback for Syracuse for 4 years or whatever, and then he kind of lost his job his final year and transferred to Illinois. But yes, he was a Syracuse quarterback. So
Well, so you obviously weren't watching that, which Giants Jets, it was bad. But what have you thought so far of like the playoffs, the postseason, where you expect? What did you think about the Diamondbacks run and everything? Like, do you have any thoughts on any of that?
yeah, I didn't think that I was like I'm in the Mad Dog Brusso category of Diamondbacks. I thought that the Phillies were easily going to take that. Actually, I was talking to Cotillo about like we were kind of like trying to like figure out like some angles, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to write about what didn't happen with Nathan Evaldi, like why they didn't sign him, kind of talk to some people." And I was like, do it on Schwarber too, just because people are asking that question, even though it's kind of easier to understand why they didn't bring back Schwarber. It's like, and I was like, because he's definitely making the World Series. That's what I said to Cotillo, and I was completely wrong on that. Pitching and defense obviously win in the postseason, and that's an area that the Red Sox lacked, right? Especially defensively. I mean, obviously pitching wise, but defense that needs to improve, and we've seen that. I mean, I don't think there's been any errors in 2 games in the World Series so far. The Diamondbacks have played great defense throughout, and the Houston Texas series was awesome. I enjoyed that. I like big name pitchers in games like that, seeing Verlander and Scherzer obviously going to pitch tonight and stuff like that. And seeing Evaldi, that's the type of stuff I like, is I like to see a good pitching matchup. I was the type of kid when, I was growing up in just outside of Boston, I would, look at the Red Sox schedule and count every 5 days to get the Pedro Martinez tickets. I'd pick a, 1-0, game over, a 15-14 game any day. I love good pitching and good pitching matchups. And so, it's been like that in the postseason. And, it's been an interesting postseason. Obviously we've seen, pitching and defense, but also home runs is so important and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a good what have you guys, have taken away from this, if anything?
Oh, just the World Series went exactly as everybody planned it to. Everybody predicted Texas Rangers, Arizona Diamondbacks, and that's what we got. So the script writers, little too obvious this year.
Yes.
That's my takeaway.
Yeah.
No, for real though, it's been fun. It's been really
Yes.
fun, man. Like, how many times have the Diamondbacks been going back to back? We've gotten to see some like true young talent, guys that are going to be stars for a while. Corbin Carroll,
Yep.
Evan Carter, Gabriel Moreno, like just some really interesting players, some guys that have been good for a while, but we haven't really gotten to see them as much on the big stage, like Zach Gallen. It's been really cool. The rise of Jordan Montgomery, and just totally boosting up his value in free agency. Postseason's always fun, but this has been a good year for it.
And I think that, like I knew Mike Hazen from his time with the Red Sox, and obviously it's a good story that, his wife, died of cancer 14 months ago, or whatever. And, it was a very challenging time, and he took time off. And obviously I think he's got 4 boys, that they have 4 sons. And I remember seeing 3 of them when he got the GM job, when Dombrowski named him the GM at Fenway. I remember the 3 of the sons came, and his wife, and how much joy they had that day just walking around the park. And this is cool that dad has this type of job. And it's such a tragedy, to like, think that happened to that family. And it's, it is cool. I was thinking the other day, I don't care if the Rangers or the Diamondbacks win, but actually it would be a really cool story if the Diamondbacks won, simply because of that, like, and like how he's handled, this situation, and how this has helped him. And, he's, that's a brave family right there.
Yeah, it
And
really is, and that's an aspect of it that I feel like I don't know. At least it's not something that that I had given a lot of thought to until the story started to come out a little bit more. So
There's been a lot of stories. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it really does make for a compelling narrative.
all right,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to jump into unless you have another thought on that.
No. Jump in.
Okay. I was gonna go into something different here, and I so every single morning I pop onto our favorite app, Twitter/X. I'll see a Christopher Smith story that's like right there at like what 7 a.m. I think maybe 6:30, 7, whatever it is, and it's always a headline and it never has the player in it. And I know who the player is every time, and I still freaking click it every single time. But my question to you on that front, though, is how do you get so? I guess like what I wanted to ask is like this has probably been the best farm system the Red Sox have had since you've been covering them professionally, I would assume. So how do you get ideas for which prospect you're going to write about each and every day?
Well, first of all, the name in the headline is a big shift from what we did in the past. Whereas, and a lot of people think that that's clickbait like type thing, and it really is not. It's actually that, you know, first of all, I wrote about Caden Rose the other day. It's like, well, how many people actually have ever heard of Caden Rose that are Red Sox fans? So if I even put his name in the headline, what is that going to do? And you're trying to narrow the headline now down to 75 characters, so it's tight and does best on Google. And that's what we've actually seen with trends is that you know where I would write exactly what the story was about in a 130 character headline before with everybody's name in it. We have found out that that Google actually does better now with smaller headlines and stuff like that. And so I can understand. So I actually try to put the headline. I try to write the player's name sometimes in Twitter and stuff because I know that that does tick people off. But I do things you know, different ways. Like I went down to the fall development camp, and a lot of times I'm just trying to I try to find as many things as possible online about them, right? Like so and that can be from going to their college page, and seeing a player that they liked, like how like they have that personal page at the end of their college and stuff like that. They're into this activity or something like that. I often go to their Instagram pages, their Twitter pages, all their social media, see if they posted anything interesting, like any interesting photos of them doing anything interesting. And a lot of times it's just going in there and just the conversation that you have with the player goes in a different direction that you didn't even know it was going to go into. I think that, I'm not the type of person, obviously, that writes about just the top 10, prospects in the organization. I want to write about everybody. And, like Abreu, when they traded for him for Houston, I mean, he wasn't, the biggest top prospect. I don't remember how that story went when I went to Portland, but we ended up talking about how he owns his own barbershop in Venezuela and stuff. So it's actually interesting. Cotillo's actually asked me to talk to his Boston College class before about like how how I get such odd topics or get like people to say things, and I don't. It just kind of goes in the direction. I don't know. Like I just kind of have a conversation with them, and I think that's good when you talk to Red Sox players in general, right? Like and building relationships. Like Mitch Moore, I have no idea about anything about hunting, but like I would talk to Mitch Moreland about hunting and stuff like that because that's what he liked. That's what he likes to do. So you try to find what these players like, and then they'll open up to you more. So, I mean, I just look like, if a guy's having a good run, a good 2-month run or something, it's like, well, let's write about him. He doesn't have to be the top prospect. He doesn't have to be, the guy that everybody knows about.
I thought that a guy that you did a really good job on that with recently was Christian Campbell. I thought that was such an excellent profile that you did of him, and it was because with Teal moving up so quickly, like everybody knew about that. But Campbell got drafted this year, and he was already at a high A. He got brought up very quickly as well, and that was a guy that I think was really sliding under the radar. So again, props to you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that he was he was actually, I listed him in some article that, to watch out for him because, his stats that he had produced, in that short span or whatever. And then I got the opportunity to talk to him, and it's just kind of just chatting with him. And, he told me about how, like, it was crazy. Like, like D Gordon, like, he was just like, went to games in Chattanooga and, when he was in AA and, he just, D Gordon just kept seeing his face show up and show up again. And he actually ended up having this really good relationship with D Gordon that he still has to this day. He texts him, D Gordon, like he went to D Gordon's games when D Gordon was in Miami and stuff like that. And so, but I think the way that I got him that I asked him that was just basically like, how did you get into, because he was telling, I had read on his page at Georgia Tech that his father was a Tennessee football player. And so I said to him, I go, why didn't you play football? And stuff like that. Like, who got you into the baseball? And he's like, my father actually discouraged me from playing football because of all he went through, the hard, football and everything. And then he's like, so I was like, oh, but did your father is a big baseball guy? Did he play baseball? No, actually, he never played baseball. I was like, how did you get into baseball then? And he's like, well, the ballpark, the AA ballpark was right down the street. So that's just kind of how that happened. But yeah, I try to get kind of everybody. And, sometimes I look at it and I'm like, I wrote a really good feature on that guy a couple of years ago, and he has been released. And but if a person has a story to tell, it should be heard.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many of those within the minors that we don't really get to hear that much about. So yeah, there's always a lot to choose from there. I do have a question for you that's moving a little further away from the minors, though, and that's back to the Red Sox regarding their outfield situation. They have a plethora of guys that are all kind of left-handed hitting and similar skill sets. We've got Yoshida, Verdugo, Duran, Abreu, St. Rafaela, and Rob Refsnyder was extended for a year too. Now, Refsnyder's right-handed, so there's a bit more of it's a little different for him, and so is Rafaela. But it just doesn't make a lot of sense to keep that many guys. They're all on the 40-man. You can't keep all those guys on the 26-man. What do you think happens with the outfield situation? Who do you think is most likely to get traded? And if there's anybody that gets signed, like a right-handed power bat, who do you think it's going to be?
I think that the most likely person to get traded is Alex Verdugo.
Yeah.
He's going into his walk year. He does have some value. Obviously, he's a guy that, he has a lot of potential offensively that, he just has these slumps that he goes into. But, the potential's always been there. He's the finalist for a Gold Glove in right field. He had a really good year defensively in right field. And I think maybe a change of scenery would be good for him. I think there's mixed opinions in the Red Sox organization on Alex Verdugo. I mean, like, he is, he was late and he got, benched for that. He got benched for not hustling when, you could look at other players on the team and they didn't hustle either. So, but so like, I think that there's mixed feelings on him with people in the organization. Obviously, I don't know what Bresla thinks about him, right? But I think he's probably the most likely to get traded.
What do you think they could get for him?
Well, since he's going into a walk year, I don't think it's going to be as much as they could have got for him last offseason, right? Like, but I think they need to trade some of these, I would try to look for, young controllable players, obviously. I have no idea. I actually haven't asked any executives that's actually a good story right there. What can you get for Alex Verdugo with 1 year left on his contract? Because you would want, like, maybe package him with some prospects and maybe get a starting pitcher, right? But I don't know. I don't know if that, if you put the right prospects into place with that, then you will. So, it could just depend on who they package him with. So yeah, so I think that, he's probably the most tradable. I wouldn't say that, Duran's totally off, like untouchable. I would think that they would look at, a market for him. I like Duran a lot as a player. I mean, like, the amount of, like, he played, like, what was it, like 200 fewer plate appearances than, Verdugo, and he was second on the team, and like by just a couple on doubles. Like the amount of times I saw this guy like actually take a single and move it, extend it into a double this year is crazy. And I think he has a lot of talent. I think his speed's a factor and all that, but you may look to move him. So those are two guys I would think. And Yoshida's just, it's difficult with that situation because he's not a great defender, obviously, in left field. And you look like, well, could he be the long-term DH? But he doesn't give you DH type production either, right? Like he's not a guy that's going to hit a ton of home runs and slug and stuff like that. He's a different type of hitter than what a DH would be. So they have a lot of, like, Breslow has a lot of, like, questions to answer in terms of the outfield. Like, how do you improve the outfield defense? How do you, like, there's just a lot of questions there that he needs to answer. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Um, I know that the free agent market is kind of a bad one coming up, right?
It's that's a kind way of putting it. It is after there is such a drop off after the first 10 to everybody else.
Yeah,
It's kind of nuts. You're not. This is not a year to rebuild through free agency. You can get a couple of starting pitchers in there. Like they're not that bad for it, but they're still mostly like number threes ideally.
yeah.
And then there's not. I mean, Teoscar Hernandez and Lourdes Gurriel are probably your best two outfielders.
And he's in Gurriel's, like, he had a really good year defensively. I mean, he had
Yeah. Oh, and he hit too.
defensive
He's
unsaved.
not.
Yeah, I mean, so if they could get him, and move and trade some guys, that would be like. I actually put him as, I put together a list of free agents in the ALDS and ALDS and NLCS, or ALCS and NLCS.
Whatever playoff matchup.
Whatever, you know what I mean. And he was like the 10th guy on the list. I was like, I don't think it's going to happen, but if you're looking for, to kind of, do some things in the outfield, I think he'd be a perfect fit.
I have some random questions here. That how many MLB ballparks have you been to so far?
I've been to every one except for Pittsburgh. And I was going to make the trip to Pittsburgh last year, not this past year, but the year before, and it just got messed up. But yes, I only have one ballpark remaining, and I have covered a game at every ballpark except for Pittsburgh and San Francisco, AT&T. But I have been to AT&T. I went out there. I made a special point to go out there when I was covering the Red Sox against Oakland. And actually, the first time I did cover the Wrigley series right after the All-Star break with the Red Sox there. So I did cover 3 Red Sox games. But the first time I ever actually went to Wrigley was when the Red Sox were in Chicago to play the White Sox a few years before that. I had, and I made it a point to go over and see Wrigley Field. So yeah, so it's been the first actual ballpark that I actually covered a game in that wasn't Fenway Park was Oakland, the Oakland Coliseum, or whatever they call that place. And so that was actually my first trip, was Oakland and Seattle. And so I went from one, I was like, wow, this place, and to Seattle, which is great. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Seattle, but that's just awesome park.
I wanted to ask though, what was the best opposing ballpark to go to, and what was the worst?
Well, I think that, like, in terms of, like, just looking at the ballpark, and I like to go and walk around every ballpark when I go. I try to, you get in so early before games, and so I try to, like, go to the top of the stadium, when no one else is in there, and walk around and walk to every little aspect of the stadium. And I always thought, like, Royals Kauffman Stadium is just a really cool stadium. There's the waterfall's cool, but they've got so much there. I really like that ballpark. I think it's just a good looking ballpark. Toronto is obviously a great place when the Toronto Blue Jays are playing well. I mean, that place can get absurdly loud. I remember covering a game in there where Josh Donaldson hit a grand slam off Clay Buchholz, and I could, like, it was the loudest I've heard. It was like Passon actually made the example of, like, Philadelphia being like an SEC, place this year in the postseason. It was like that in Toronto. I mean, that place gets crazy when they're good, and I wish I had been there. I think that was the same year Batista hit the home run in the postseason, which that place went crazy. But so those are probably the two, which from a work standpoint, actually, like, the Tropicana Field is actually a good park, and, like, just because the press box is really big, and it's right near right down low, and so you can see everything really good. And Camden Yards is another one. Some of those ballparks, like Camden Yards, you have to really watch out for foul balls. Like, you have to really be paying attention every minute of the game, or you're gonna, because there was actually two that came flying right near me this year at Camden Yards. So yeah, it's really cool to get to go to ballparks and, to see different things.
I wanted to follow that up with this is a food podcast. We talk about food all the freaking time. Every single Red Sox prospect we have on here, we always ask them a question. Not going to ask you that question just because you're a Northeastern guy.
We can still ask him it. I don't see why we can't ask him that. They have that food that we're talking about in the Northeast.
It's not the right food, though. He's not going to. All right, fine. I'll ask it to you. What is your go-to fast food fried chicken place?
I don't have a KFC. I haven't been there since college, though. I actually have to pat myself on the back here. My daughter has a milk and egg allergy, and so she's 4 years old, so she can't eat, like, pizza unless it's vegan pizza and all this stuff and everything. So the last outbreak that she had, she did, like, this egg challenge with the actual allergist, and ended up at the hospital because of her reaction being so bad. I told her, from now on, I'm only going to eat what you ate. So I don't eat anything that she can't eat, except when I'm on the road. If it's a ballpark where there's no other food, and I have no options if she's not with me in another ballpark. So that's the only time I can do it. But otherwise, I don't eat milk, egg, dairy, that type of stuff anymore.
That is a devoted father right there. I'm impressed.
I feel bad for, like, it was after the second hospital visit that I was like, this really sucks for her. We always have to bring her food to, like, parties, stuff like that. Like, birthday parties, kids' birthday parties. They had pizza the other day. And we had to, so if I'm eating the pizza at the kid's birthday party, like, I can not eat that pizza, right? Like, so I try to do that for her. So not very good with food.
No, it's respectable. I had to ask, but I kind of figured, us.
What are you talking about, though, in terms of the fried chicken?
It's like, so the correct answer is Zaxby's. It's a Southern chain. Then you have Cane's, and then people have said Chick-fil-A. People have said,
people meaning the majority have said Chick-fil-A.
No, I think Cane's may have the majority, to be honest.
No, I like Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, it's good. It's all good. I'm not hating. Just Zaxby's is the right answer.
I think it's our end game is to get Zaxby's sponsorship for this show.
I've already put it in my Twitter bio. So, by the way, the guy we had on in the last episode, I thought he was joking, And then also Brendan Salucci at Tulane, his teammate is like somebody higher up and when they were playing in Tulane was like the co-owner of Canes. So they were like, we had it all the time. So it was crazy. All right. Yeah. So the fried chicken thing, not a really thing up in the Northeast. I get it.
Although I hear that there's some pitchers on the 2011 Red Sox that were big into fried chicken.
Yeah, they're kind of into. We should just rebrand the show the Chicken and Beer Boys, Parker.
Never mind about that. Okay, go on. Sorry.
No, Ed, what do you got?
All right. So I made a tweet about this a while back, and it was dead serious about it. My dad has gone on the record saying that not only are you, Christopher Smith, his favorite Red Sox writer, you're also the only one that he likes. Which
funny because
other than he liked Peter Gammons a lot, but nobody has accepted the man.
How does somebody not like Chad Jennings, man?
I don't know. I don't think he has a subscription to the Athletic.
Nicer than me. Actually, I'm a very person that's like hard to get to like it for, but you have to kind of know my personality a little bit. So I don't know why that is. Although me and Cotillo, we really mesh together real quick and stuff.
He loves your writing. He thinks that you are the best Boston writer since Peter Gammons.
Thank your father.
But my question for you though is, who is your favorite baseball writer?
That's a good question. I liked how, like Jeff Passan, like, the way that he approaches things, like even before he got the job at ESPN, like I always liked how he was breaking news in terms of like major topics, right? Like, instead of just like this guy is, and obviously he's, he has to do that now where he's, breaking free agent, news about, this guy
dropping bombs atomically.
There was a lot of like really good things though that he would write, like, for Yahoo and even for ESPN still now that, just the things that he's able to find, like investigative type stuff. And I really like that type of journalism is investigative. You can look at breaking news and I can have, this prospect's, being promoted or this player's being promoted from Worcester to Boston, according to source. But like, after I do that, 2 seconds after I do that, 10 people will have it. Right. So like the cool thing is when you really nail down a story, like, about something and, obviously with Drellick and Rosenthal, doing that thing with the Houston Astros. I mean, that's like that type of thing that I'd really like to read. I'm into that kind of stuff. Obviously I read Peter Gammons plenty when, I was growing up. But I've always been the type of person that I like it's important to incorporate analytics and, in things like that into it. But I also like the kind of like the personal sides of things and stuff like that. I think that a good mixture of that in an article where you can get some of the, learn somewhat about the person's personality, but also learn somewhat about what they are as a player, especially with the prospect types or new guys that come to the Red Sox that maybe, on the major league roster that people don't know much about. I think that's important is to kind of blend those two things together.
And so you've given us 50 minutes of your time right now. I just have,
I have
one more.
I can go for another 50.
I didn't know if you had to put children to bed or anything like that. So,
you guys saved me from that tonight. The wife was doing it.
Okay. I don't feel as bad then. I don't get married till next year, and Ed's getting married in a couple weeks, so we're not in that boat yet. I know we will be one day.
Soon. Thank you.
We'll be there soon, Ed. Don't worry.
Kids are fun, but they're hard, man. So
yeah. No, I'm excited. I'm not saying I'm not excited, but it's just like I'm enjoying it's quiet, like out there. She's watching a show. Like I'm like, okay, I'm good.
Well, me and my wife were married for quite a few years before we had kids. So it was a real adjustment. We finally had a kid. And our youngest woke us up at, like the first year, like 4 in the morning. And that was when she was ready to go for the day. It was like 4 o'clock. I mean, I was in like the naps that she took during the day were like 20-minute naps total. 20 minutes at a time total. So it's You know, the one that our son who's one, he's actually much better napper. He can nap for like 2.5 hours straight, and but you know, it's a challenge. It definitely, I would say that have some fun with your wife before you have kids. Go
Yeah.
travel, do things. My wife actually used to come on a lot of these road trips with me. Like she's a teacher, as I said. So like, you know, during the summer, she would come to the West Coast. She's even been, you know, Kansas City. I mean, she would come to all these ballparks. Actually, Ian Brown was making a joke one time. He was like, "Your wife's been to probably more ballparks than, you know, half the beat reporters." So, like, yeah, it's kind of cool. Like, travel as much as you can and do as many fun things as you can before the kids give you hand, mouth, and foot disease.
Yeah. Oh, I remember seeing that story that you put out there. That's
I've had it twice from them, but
not making me excited for kids, but we'll still get there. I wanted to ask, what's next for you this off season? So, you mentioned you were going to go to the GM meetings. I would assume you're going back to spring training, but what else do you got scheduled this off season?
yeah, so I'm doing the GM meetings with Sean McAdam, who obviously Sean, you know, joined us at Mass Live during the season, and then the winter meetings will be Cotillo and Sean. I love the GM meetings because, and it's awesome that it's going to be in Arizona because I've already put in, you know, for credentials for 3 Arizona Fall League games. I'm really looking, you know, forward to seeing some of those players that are on the Red Sox play for Glendale, interviewing all those guys, and you know, coming home with a bunch of, you know, prospect stories as well. But the coolest part of the GM meetings is, and Bradford was actually the one that told me when I was, you know, when I was like 2010 or 11, when I was, you know, working in another place and, you know, kind of like paying my own way to certain things, like just to get ahead in the job. And he's like, if you want to go to something that's valuable, go to the GM meetings, not the winter meetings, because and he was right. Like the GM meetings, they set up a room with the GMs, you know, for an hour, the American League GMs, then for the next hour, the National League GMs, and you just can do one-on-ones and you can talk to them about as much stuff as you want. And so it's a great experience. You know, obviously the rumor mill isn't, you know, pumping like it is at the winter meetings and transaction stuff like that. But I love the GM meetings because, you know, you can come away with some, you know, interesting stories away from it. So I'm going to enjoy that. I'm going to try to take some time off and spend with the kids and stuff. And you know, it's really going to be kind of, you know, just, uh, you know, I think it's going to be cool with Breslow just to talk about some minor leaguers, right? Like, and how his assessment is of the system and stuff like that. I want to kind of know how he goes about that, right? Like what he's done. Like, has he already watched, you know, so much, you know, tape and stuff like that, and, you know, crunching the numbers on these guys. So I'm going to be big into that. And so, yeah, so you know, the off season's always a fun time, you know, in terms of, because, you know, that it's much more fun in baseball than any other sport, right? The winter, the hot stove and stuff like that. So.
Ed, I don't know if you have something else.
Oh, I've been really happy with everything tonight. Like, thank you so much for giving us this time and this conversation and answering all of our questions.
Do you want? I'll give you one more story if you have time.
Okay, let's hear
We
it.
have
Let's hear
plenty
it.
of time. I just don't want to keep you on forever, you know. But
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Well, as I said, I covered high school sports when I was, you know, right out of college. I went to Syracuse and I covered high school sports in Missouri for a couple of years, and randomly came home. Was like, you know, I missed my family or whatever, and I didn't have a job. And you know, I quit that job after 2 years there, and I just came home, and I was like, I'm a drummer, so I was thinking, like, you know, like, get on the drums 8 hours a day, maybe start a band too, yada yada yada. And I just saw this job with the Eagle Tribune at the time, and, you know, it was kind of like a general assignment sports reporter. You'll do everything. So when I went there, you know, I grew up a, you know, huge baseball guy. I mean, as I said, I used to count Pedro's days, you know, to go to his starts.
Which
I went,
suburb are you from for Boston?
I lived in Weymouth, so
Okay,
it's right near Quincy,
gotcha,
and
gotcha, gotcha.
and you know, when I actually, when I was growing up, I went to Berkeley College of Music, like summer programs and stuff. And I'd end up walking over to Fenway Park, like just to see the ballpark, just because I loved, baseball so much. And so, but the first time when I got that job, I wasn't like the Red Sox writer or whatever, but they needed somebody to go to some Red Sox games the first year. So they were like, anybody want to volunteer? And I was like, well, I've always liked baseball, so I can do it. Why not try? And so I don't know if you know Bill Burke, but he's the sports editor at the Eagle Tribune, and he was supposed to go in with me to the first game. The first game was Josh Beckett against CC Sabathia on Easter Sunday in 2010, Sunday night baseball game. And he was supposed to go in there and show me around and like help me out. On the way to like Easter brunch with my family, I got so sick. I threw up several times in the car. I was stuck in the middle of the traffic on
no.
And I threw up in the car. And I got home. I got to my parents' house and I said, I am wicked sick. I was like, I got to go up and sleep this off. And I get a phone message. I woke up to throw up probably. And I got a phone message and it was Bill. And he's like, I heard, I'm sick. I can't come to the game tonight. So you're going to have to do it all by yourself. So I'm like, oh, no.
No.
So,
what a coincidence, Bill.
Yes, yeah. But I didn't say anything. I was like, oh, I guess I'm gonna just do this. And I was so sick, my father had to drive me in. I couldn't even drive. And so
it's like the most millennial work ethic story I think I've ever heard. Like, no, they're like, oh, I'm dying. It's fine. Let me go in. Let me go in. It's okay.
Yeah. But so I went in there and I just had such a miserable time. I mean, I didn't throw up at all in there, but I was not feeling well and I had such a miserable time. And, it was up so late and just everything was difficult, it seemed. And I said to the sports editor after that, I'm like, if you need me to go to a Red Sox game here and there, that's fine. But I like the high school sports. I'm good.
Right,
I'm good with the Red Sox. I don't really need to do this. And he said, well, why don't you go back one more time? Carlos Pena is going to be in town with the Rays, and he's from Haverhill, and we like
Haverhill's finest.
He's like, we get a story with him every time, and so I went back in that one time, and I was like, all right, I'll try that one more time. I'll try one more time. So I went in back there, and just kind of fell in love with it that one day, So like, like just getting to talk one-on-one with, Carlos Pena and being in the, visitors clubhouse and seeing how much access that you actually had in there and stuff like that. And how much access you actually had in the home clubhouse. Eventually, I just didn't know that because, there was a million reporters there on opening day and, so it was fun. Like, when I was at the Eagle Tribune, I would cover high school games and then, write the story in the car and then head over to Fenway. Like I was doing a lot of that on my own time. And
teach you how to write quickly too.
It does. And so I was really doing that a lot on my own time, was just like, and I even was late to my rehearsal dinner because for my marriage, because I was at Fenway getting some pregame stuff. so like
in the doghouse.
Well, actually that's why I always say like this good wife for me, because she didn't really care. And so I say she knows who I am, and I was on time for the wedding, the actual wedding, so that's important. But
can I ask about your experience working at Fenway? So I do data streaming for the Woo Sox, which is like I'm on the phone with an operator during it, and I give them updates, and they update gambling odds, they update the live scoring trackers, all that stuff. And I had the opportunity to do that for the Red Sox because they're always looking for people for that. It's kind of a thankless job, but you get like the press pass and you get to go into them for free. And I started taking it, and I kind of had this like probably overthinking moment where I was kind of like, I don't want to lose the magic of Fenway. I don't want to lose that feeling that I get when I go there for however many games that I go to, that I've been doing since I was like a little kid. Do you find that you no longer get that feeling? or is it just that you have to like really compartmentalize? Because I imagine that when you're there every day and it's a job, like it's got to be different.
It is different. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember as a kid, like when I would go up, my father would obviously bring me there when I was, 6 or 7, just walking up the ramp and seeing the Green Monster and
There's
just
nothing like it. It
there's
was
nothing like it. And like, so it is, but it's cool to know, like, that you're in the ballpark that, I mean, I was a guy that watched 162 games as a kid. Like, we'd go to some family party and I'd find my way out with my dad's keys into the car and listen to it on the game on the radio and stuff like that. So like, it's cool to have a job that, you know, I grew up, like, I appreciate it because of that, because, I mean, I was a Tony Pena fan, like, like that was my favorite player, when I was 6 years old, and I followed him to the Cleveland Guardians. We'll say the Guardians. So, yeah, I mean, it was, they spent so so many fun days at Fenway, and it's like, it's still cool to go there. But it is, it doesn't have the same feel, I guess, as it once did. But it is, I appreciate every day I get to go there.
Yeah, I kind of found myself, I spent every single pretty much home game in Worcester this past year.
I just assumed they'd set up a cot for you there or something. I don't know how you managed to be there, because you have a day job too.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I was tired once the end of the season was here, and it's not even, I don't know, but I found myself in my fiance can probably attest to this, is like I wasn't as like, oh well, like I'm upset or whatever that they lost. It's like I just was like, I wanted to go talk to whoever that had like a good game. I don't know. Definitely puts things into a different lens, I think, and I think I can agree with you, Ed, on that, for Fenway, for me as well. But Chris, we appreciate the time. We could probably still chat for another like 50 minutes, but definitely appreciate the time, and we'd love to have you on sometime in the future as well.
Anytime you want me on, I'm good. I'm good to go.
Yeah, we'll have to have that next 50 minutes right after a bunch of moves have been made. So
exactly. Emergency podcast after they sign Shohei Ohtani. How about that?
Oh,
okay. Wow. Ohtani emergency podcast. I promise you, I'll come on the emergency podcast with you if they sign Ohtani. I'll bring Cotillo on there with me.
Let's go.
I just wrote it down, so it's official. But thank you, Chris. We appreciate it.
All right, guys.